Industrialization is also going to lead to a huge expansion in capitalism. And one of the important developments we see in this growth is the use of mass production of goods. And so by mass producing goods, it makes goods cheaper. I can produce them faster, therefore I can sell them cheaper. And so this means that now goods that weren't once were expensive and kind of reserved for the upper class, well, now more people could begin to afford those goods. And so Eli Whitney is famous for developing the cotton gin, which was extremely important in the separating cotton from the seeds and cotton production. But one of his maybe more important inventions and developments was the use of interchangeable parts. Because using interchangeable parts, now I can begin to mass produce goods. And so he begins the use of interchangeable parts using firearms. So instead of each piece being unique to an individual gun, now all of his guns use these same pieces. And so you could swap out pieces and you could produce them much faster and therefore cheaper. Henry Ford is going to introduce the use of assembly lines. And using assembly lines and interchangeable parts, he's able to mass produce cars. And with that, it made cars much cheaper. He could complete the basic car coming down the assembly line in about 93 minutes. And before, it would take about 728 minutes to produce this car. And so by producing cars faster, he's able to sell them cheaper. And as a result, more people could afford cars. And so cars are going to spread across the United States as a result. Another side effect of these changes is the growth of monopolies. And so early on, especially, government tended to support these big businesses. They wanted the growth of these businesses. They wanted the wealth that these businesses brought in. And so in that environment, we're going to see the growth of monopolies. So monopolies are basically big businesses that buy out their competition so that there is no longer competition. And you can have two different types of monopolies. You can have what we call a vertical monopoly, where one company tries to control every phase of the production of a good. And so, for example, let's say we're talking oil. Instead of me just buying up all the oil refineries, I'm also going to buy up the drilling of the oil. I'm going to control that phase. I'm going to control the shipping of the oil into my oil refineries. And I'm going to control the finished product as well. And I'm going to control all the byproducts. And so from oil, I'm going to control the sale of kerosene. And then from there, I'm going to control the shipping of these finished products. And so that's an example of a vertical monopoly. I want to control every single phase of the production of a good. Horizontal monopolies, instead of trying to control every phase of the production of a good, I'm going to focus on one phase, but I'm going to dominate that phase. And so, again, if we're using oil as our example, instead of me trying to buy up the drilling of the oil and control all that and the shipping, I might just focus on oil refining. And I'm going to buy up all the other oil refineries until I'm basically the only oil refinery in my nation. That's an example of a horizontal monopoly. And the problem with monopolies is that ultimately they get rid of competition. And competition is really what guides a capitalist economy, because competition ensures that prices are kept fair and quality is kept high. So, as a result of industrialization, we're going to see the material standards of living increase greatly. And again, that goes back to the mass production of goods. And things that were once luxuries now become common. For example, people could now own more clothing than ever before. We're also going to see improvements in sanitation. We're going to see reduced death rates in adults and children. We're going to see better medical care. We're going to see reduced deaths due to childbirth. We're going to see the average lifespan increase as well. And we're also going to see, as the population continues to grow, urbanization increases greatly, the growth of cities, because these factories were located in cities. And so tons of people are going to flood into these factories to find work. And that's going to lead to rapid urbanization. And many of these cities weren't really prepared for that rapid growth. And so that's going to lead to some problems, especially early on. We're going to see poor housing, tenement housing. We're going to see pollution widespread from these factories and inadequate water and inadequate sewage systems. And it would take a while for these cities to catch up. But by the late 1800s, the government does begin to step in, they catch up, and they begin to provide things like sewer system. They pass building codes to ensure that these buildings meet certain standards. Simple things, they hire rat catchers to get rid of rats and cut down on the spread of diseases in the cities, and hire more police officers to cut down on crime rates. So it took a while, but eventually things would improve. But initially, much like the working conditions, the living conditions were also very poor. We're also going to see some changes in family structures and family roles. So first off, we're going to see a new class of wealthy peoples. And really, up until this point in history, most of your wealth came through land ownership. And so your upper aristocracy were, for the most part, your landowners. Well, now we have the growth of these captains of industries, these factory owners that now make up this new wealthy class. We're going to see the growth of a middle class begin to emerge. Middle class people included factory managers, accountants. We see new professionals like doctors and lawyers and teachers begin to spread. And then we see changes in the working class, because now the working class are mostly unskilled peoples. They're paid very low wages and don't really have any skills to justify changes in wages. And so their status kind of declines. We see sharp changes to family life. Again, before, family life and work life were closely integrated. Now you had this sharp distinction where you had to leave your home and go to work. And so people worked long hours outside of the home. 12 to 14 hours a day was spent working in these factories. We're also going to see some changes to family structure. Fathers and sons, some, especially in the middle and upper class, gained some status. If you were a upper class male, you actually improved your status and you might have had extra leisure time. And so we're going to see some increases in leisure activities like reading. We're going to see sports increase, bars spread, gambling, etc. But for your lower class men, their status is going to decline as they kind of lose value as workers in factories. For lower class women, they too are going to take jobs in factories. Lower class children are also going to be forced to supplement the family income by working in factories. And it's really not until the mid 1800s that the government begins to step in and put some restrictions on child labor.